It was an ordinary morning at the small neighborhood school. The sun had just started to peek over the rooftops, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and orange. Birds chirped quietly, adding a gentle music to the calm before the school day truly began. Students arrived in their neat uniforms, some running excitedly with laughter, while others walked slowly, still half asleep and clutching their bags tightly. The air smelled faintly of fresh chalk and wet earth from last night's rain, a smell that made the morning feel alive yet familiar. Standing near the tall iron gate of the school, a man in his late 50s quietly observed the arrival of the children. His uniform was clean but slightly worn, and his face had lines that spoke of years of hard work. He wasn't loud or showy, never tried to draw attention, and yet there was a quiet dignity in the way he stood, his posture straight, his eyes scanning every child as they came in. He was the school guard, and to many of the students he was just someone who let them in and out of the gate. Most children hardly noticed him beyond a polite "good morning," if they remembered at all. But today, one boy noticed him more than usual. The boy was small for his age, with bright eyes that seemed to notice even the tiniest details. While most children were focused on their friends or rushing to their classrooms, he paused for a moment, looking at the man at the gate. There was something about the way the guard stood, quiet and patient, that caught his attention. He seemed tired yet alert, careful yet somehow lonely. The boy watched as the guard helped a younger student lift a heavy bag, as he smiled gently at a girl who had tripped over a stone, and as he nodded at another student who had forgotten to close the gate behind them. There was a kindness in these small acts, but it was subtle, almost invisible to everyone else. The boy remembered seeing the guard every day for months. He had noticed how the man always arrived early before the first bell, and left only after the last student had gone home. He had seen him eat his lunch quickly, often alone, sitting under the shade of a small tree near the wall. Sometimes the boy thought he saw the man sigh quietly, as if carrying invisible weight on his shoulders. He didn't know the story behind the lines on the man's face or the sadness that sometimes flickered in his eyes, but he felt somehow that the man deserved more attention than anyone gave him. As the boy walked toward his classroom, he noticed a small flower growing by the edge of the pathway. It was delicate and simple, almost hidden among the grass and soil. Its petals were soft and pale, almost glowing in the morning sunlight. He bent down to look at it, feeling a sudden thought stir in his mind. It was strange how something so small could be so beautiful, standing there quietly unnoticed by most people. The boy picked the flower carefully, making sure not to crush it. He held it gently in his hand, turning it around, studying the petals and the way it caught the light. Throughout the day, the boy could not stop thinking about the man at the gate. He remembered how the guard had smiled at him when he had forgotten to bring his homework one morning, how he had offered help when a student had dropped a heavy bag of books, and how he always seemed to keep a watchful eye, making sure no one got hurt. No one ever thanked him properly. No one ever asked if he was okay. To most, he was just the man at the gate, the person whose job was to be unnoticed. During recess, the boy found himself looking for the guard again. The playground was noisy and full of energy. Children ran around shouting and laughing, playing games that seemed endless. Teachers were moving between groups of students, giving instructions or keeping an eye on those who needed help. But the boy's eyes were drawn to the corner of the playground, where the guard was sitting quietly on a bench. He was eating a small piece of bread from a brown paper bag alone. The boy noticed how he looked at the children with a soft smile, even as he seemed lost in thought. There was something about that quiet presence that felt important, like a gentle reminder that someone was always looking out for others. Even when no one noticed, the boy approached slowly, unsure if it was the right moment but feeling a strong pull to do something kind. He remembered the flower he had picked in the morning. It was small, but it seemed perfect. It felt like the right thing to do, even though he didn't know why. Holding it tightly in his hand, he walked closer, feeling a little nervous. He wasn't sure how the man would react. Would he smile? Would he think it was strange? Would he even notice? The uncertainty made his heart beat faster. When he reached the guard, he cleared his throat softly. The man looked up, his eyes meeting the boy's. There was a flicker of curiosity and perhaps a hint of surprise. The boy extended his hand slowly, holding out the small flower. For a moment, there was silence. The noise of the playground seemed to fade away, and it was just the boy, the flower, and the man sitting there. The guard's eyes softened and a small smile appeared on his lips. He looked at the flower, then at the boy, and for a moment words were not necessary. The gesture itself said everything. The boy felt a warmth inside him as the guard accepted the flower. He didn't need to say anything. The smile, the way the guard held the flower carefully as if it were precious, was enough. It was a simple moment, quiet and small, but it carried more meaning than the boy could put into words. For a moment, the guard seemed lighter, as if the weight on his shoulders had lifted even just a little. The boy felt a connection that was hard to explain, a shared understanding that sometimes kindness is the only thing that matters. Throughout the rest of the day, the boy couldn't stop thinking about that moment. He thought about how one small action, a tiny gesture, could bring happiness to someone who rarely received it. He thought about the unseen struggles people carry and how easy it is to overlook them. He thought about how powerful it felt to do something without expecting anything in return. The memory of the guard's smile stayed with him, and he felt a quiet satisfaction that made his chest feel full in a way he hadn't experienced before. Even as the day went on, and lessons continued, and the bell rang for the next class, the boy kept glancing toward the gate. He wanted to see the guard again, to see if the flower had made a difference. When he looked, he saw the man adjusting the small flower carefully in his pocket, a gentle smile still lingering on his face. The boy knew then that even small acts of kindness could ripple through someone's day in ways that were invisible but deeply felt. As the sun began to set and the school day came to an end, the boy walked home slowly, thinking about the events of the day. He thought about the power of noticing others, of offering even the smallest gifts, and how those gestures could brighten the lives of people who often went unnoticed. He didn't know what the future would hold or what the guard's life was like outside the school, but he felt certain of one thing. Today, he had done something that mattered. And sometimes that is enough. That night, as the boy lay in bed, he could still see the image of the guard holding the flower, the quiet smile on his face, the gentle eyes that seemed to say thank you without words. The boy realized that kindness is not about recognition or reward. It's about seeing someone, truly seeing them, and offering a piece of your heart without expecting anything back. He fell asleep thinking about what tomorrow might bring, quietly hoping to see the guard again, to share another small moment of connection. Little did he know, this small act, this simple gesture would ripple far beyond what he could imagine. It was a beginning, a quiet spark of compassion that had the power to change not just one day but many, for both the boy and the man who spent his days guarding the school gates. And so the ordinary morning had led to an extraordinary moment, one that no one watching from afar might have noticed, but one that carried the weight of 100 unspoken words, the kind that touch hearts and stay there forever. The next morning, the boy woke up with the memory of yesterday still fresh in his mind, the image of the guard holding the small flower, the gentle smile that had touched his heart, stayed with him like a quiet warmth he could not shake. He dressed quickly, finishing his breakfast with unusual eagerness. Normally, mornings felt slow and ordinary, but today felt different. Today, the boy carried with him a small sense of purpose, a tiny but real hope that he could make someone's day brighter again. On the way to school, the boy thought about the guard. He remembered how alone the man often seemed, sitting quietly under the shade during breaks, eating his small lunch while the children played. He wondered what the man's life was like outside the school, what kind of home he had, and whether anyone in his family knew the weight he carried each day. The boy realized he didn't know the answers, but he wanted to try to understand. He wanted to be someone who noticed, someone who saw what others often overlooked. When he reached the school gate, the guard was already there, as usual, standing tall and alert. The morning sunlight highlighted the lines on his face and the gray streaks in his hair, and for a moment the boy simply watched him. There was a quiet dignity in the way the man carried himself, a kind of strength that didn't need to be loud or boastful. Most students would rush past without a second glance, but the boy felt drawn to him. He wanted to do something again, even if it was as small as a smile or a greeting. During the first class, the boy found it hard to concentrate. His mind kept wandering back to the guard, to the small flower, and to the feeling that had settled inside him, a mixture of excitement, curiosity, and something like empathy. He couldn't explain why, but he felt that the guard's life, the quiet struggles he carried, mattered in a way that deserved attention. Every time the teacher spoke, he nodded along, but he was thinking about what he could do next. Could he offer another small act of kindness? Could he find a way to make the guard feel seen, really seen, in a world where so many ignored him? At recess, the boy wandered toward the edge of the playground where the guard usually sat. Today he wasn't alone. Some other students had gathered nearby, laughing and playing, but the guard remained quiet, observing. The boy noticed that he looked a little tired, perhaps more so than usual. There were dark circles under his eyes, and the way he moved, even in small gestures, seemed heavy, deliberate and careful. The boy felt a sudden wave of concern. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was a feeling of wanting to help, of wanting to offer comfort in some way. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small notebook he had brought from home. It wasn't much, just a simple book with plain pages, but the boy had filled it with small drawings and short notes. He had been thinking of giving it to the guard for a few days, but had hesitated, unsure if it would be accepted or understood. Today, however, he felt a courage he hadn't felt before. He wanted to do it, to share a part of his world, hoping that even a tiny bit of thoughtfulness could brighten the guard's day. The boy approached slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. The guard looked up as he drew near, his eyes calm, steady yet filled with curiosity. "Good morning," the boy said softly, holding out the notebook. The guard raised an eyebrow but didn't speak. He simply took it, turning the small notebook over in his hands as if he weren't quite sure what to expect. The boy watched nervously, waiting for a reaction. Inside the notebook were small sketches of trees, flowers, birds, and little notes written in a child's handwriting. Some pages had drawings of the school playground, some of the classroom, and others simply had words of encouragement. "You are important, you are seen, your kindness matters." The boy had written these over several nights, thinking of the guard, thinking of how simple words and images could bring a small spark of happiness. The guard flipped through the pages slowly. For a moment he didn't speak. His face softened and a quiet stillness settled between them. The noise of children playing seemed to fade, and it was just the boy and the guard connected in a way that words alone could not describe. The guard's eyes glistened slightly, and he looked at the boy with a mixture of surprise, gratitude, and something deeper. Something like relief. "Thank you," the guard said finally, his voice low and steady. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it carried weight. The boy felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling of accomplishment that went beyond any reward. He had done something kind, something meaningful, and it had reached another human being in a way that mattered. He didn't need praise. The guard's reaction was enough. Over the next few days, the boy continued to notice the small details about the guard. He saw how he helped students who struggled to open the heavy gate, how he carried books or bags for younger children without being asked, and how he always seemed to keep a quiet watch, ensuring that everyone was safe. Each observation strengthened the boy's desire to show appreciation. It wasn't about recognition or reward. It was about understanding, about noticing someone who often went unnoticed. One afternoon, the boy stayed a little longer after school. Most students had gone home, leaving the playground quiet and empty. The guard was there, sitting on the bench as usual, watching the sun begin to set behind the trees. The boy approached and sat quietly beside him. For a few moments, neither spoke. The wind rustled through the leaves, carrying the soft scent of the earth and grass. It was peaceful, calm, and the boy felt a connection, a silent understanding that sometimes just being present was enough. Finally, the boy spoke. "I wanted to tell you. I see you. I notice everything you do. You help everyone, even when no one says thank you. And I think that's important." His voice was quiet but sincere. The guard looked at him, a faint smile appearing on his lips, and nodded slowly. The boy didn't need to say more. The words were enough, and the guard understood. In the following days, a small change began to appear. The guard started to smile more openly at the students, sometimes even chatting briefly with them. He still maintained his quiet dignity, but there was a softness now, a subtle lightness in his movements. The boy noticed, and it made him feel proud. Not in a boastful way, but in a gentle, happy way that comes from seeing good grow in unexpected places. One morning, as the boy walked to school, he noticed a tiny bouquet of wildflowers placed near the gate. They weren't perfect or arranged neatly, but they were bright, colorful, and full of life. The boy smiled. Someone else had noticed too. Someone else had felt the same desire to offer kindness, to brighten the day of someone who quietly gave so much. He realized that small gestures, even unnoticed by many, could ripple through the world, touching hearts in ways no one could always see. The boy began to understand something important about life. It wasn't the big gestures, the grand speeches, or the attention that truly mattered. It was the small things, the smile, the flower, the drawing, the quiet acknowledgement of someone's presence. These were the acts that built connections, created warmth, and healed silent burdens carried by others. He realized that even as a child he could make a difference. Even one person, one act of kindness could ripple outwards and change the tone of someone's day, maybe even their life. The guard, too, began to change, though subtly. He seemed lighter in his steps, less burdened by the invisible weight he carried. He started engaging more with the students, not just in his role as a guard, but as someone who could be approachable, someone who could be human and kind and visible. He smiled, nodded, and sometimes laughed softly when a child made a joke. It wasn't a transformation everyone noticed, but the boy did, and that was enough. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with soft shades of gold and purple, the boy approached the guard once more. He carried another small flower, picked carefully from the school garden. The guard saw it and raised his eyebrows, a gentle chuckle escaping his lips. The boy handed it over quietly, saying nothing, just offering it as a gift. The guard accepted it, holding it in his hand like a treasure, and for a moment they shared a connection that didn't need words, a bond built on recognition, empathy, and the quiet power of noticing one another. That evening, walking home, the boy felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had begun to understand something true, that life was made of these small, meaningful moments, that noticing someone, acknowledging them, and offering kindness, no matter how small, was powerful, and that even a child with little more than a flower or a few words could make the world a slightly brighter place for someone else. He thought about the days ahead, about all the people in his life who went unnoticed, who carried burdens silently, and he made a quiet promise to himself. He would continue noticing, continue offering small gestures of kindness, and continue reminding those around him that they mattered, even in ways no one else might see. And in that promise he felt hope, warmth, and the quiet joy of being able to touch someone's heart in a simple but lasting way. The boy didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or what challenges the guard might face. But he knew that as long as he could offer a small smile, a word, or a flower, he could make a difference. And that difference, no matter how small, was enough to light up even the quietest, loneliest moments, turning them into something beautiful and memorable. The next week at school began like any other, with the soft hum of morning life filling the air. Birds chirped outside the tall windows. Children's laughter bounced through the hallways, and the scent of freshly cleaned classrooms mingled with the earthy smell of the playground. Yet for the boy, things felt a little different. The guard at the gate, whom he had come to notice in a quiet, thoughtful way, seemed lighter somehow. There was a softness in the man's expression, a calmness in the way he greeted students that made the boy's heart feel warm. It was as though the small gestures, the flower, the notebook, the quiet words had begun to ripple outward, touching the guard in ways no one could see at first. During the morning break, the boy noticed something unusual. A few other children had started to approach the guard, smiling, greeting him politely, even offering small gestures of friendliness. One girl handed him a drawing she had made. Another boy held out a small leaf he had found. The guard accepted each gift with quiet dignity, a gentle smile spreading across his face. He nodded, he said thank you, and sometimes, just for a brief moment, his eyes twinkled with genuine happiness. The boy felt a surge of joy. It was one thing for his own gestures to make a difference, but it was something extraordinary to see that others were noticing too. Kindness was contagious, and he realized that his small acts had started a chain of it. The boy sat under a tree nearby, watching silently. He noticed the guard's hands, rough and worn from years of work, carefully holding each small gift. He noticed the way the man's shoulders seemed to relax, how the corners of his eyes crinkled with a smile that was rare and beautiful. For so long, the guard had been invisible to the world, a quiet presence performing important work without acknowledgement. And yet now there was a shift. The children's small gestures, combined with the boy's own efforts, were creating a moment of human connection that the guard had not felt in a long time. It was during lunch that something remarkable happened. The boy had finished his meal and was walking to the bench near the playground when he noticed the guard sitting alone, staring at the small flower that the boy had given him days ago. The flower, though slightly wilted, still held a certain charm. It was a reminder of care, of attention, of a world beyond duties and routines. The boy approached cautiously, unsure if he should speak or just sit silently. The guard looked up and smiled faintly when he saw the boy. "You always seem to find the right little things," he said softly, his voice carrying a warmth that made the boy's chest tighten with happiness. "It's not just the flower. It's the thought behind it. You noticed me when no one else did. That matters more than you know." The boy felt a lump in his throat. He hadn't realized how much such simple words could mean. "I just wanted you to know that someone cares," he replied quietly. The guard nodded slowly. "It's easy to feel invisible sometimes. You reminded me that even small gestures can matter. Even small acts can touch a life in ways that seem invisible but are very real." For a while they sat together in silence, the sun casting soft shadows across the ground. The boy observed the guard, noticing how the small smile and gentle tone had changed his entire demeanor. There was a softness now, a lightness that hadn't been there before. It struck the boy that sometimes people carry burdens silently, waiting for just a tiny spark of recognition, a moment of kindness to remind them that they are seen, that they matter. After lunch, the boy decided to do something different. He walked over to a nearby tree and picked a few more small flowers, choosing ones that were bright and fresh. He arranged them carefully in his hands, thinking about how each flower could carry a simple message. You are noticed, you are valued, you are appreciated. As he approached the guard again, he realized he didn't need to say much. Words were not necessary. The gesture itself spoke volumes. The guard noticed the flowers and his eyes softened. "You didn't have to," he said gently. But the boy shook his head. "I wanted to," he said simply. He handed the flowers over and the guard accepted them, holding them carefully as if they were precious. He inhaled their scent quietly, closing his eyes for a moment. The boy watched, feeling a quiet happiness, knowing that something as simple as a few flowers could lift someone's heart. The ripple effect continued over the next few days. Other students began to act differently toward the guard. Some greeted him with a cheerful "good morning." Others offered small notes of appreciation, simple drawings, or even just a smile. The guard started to respond more openly, nodding, laughing softly, engaging briefly in conversation. He still maintained his quiet dignity, but there was a new lightness in his interactions. For the boy, watching this change unfold was both humbling and inspiring. He realized that small acts of kindness, when done consistently, could slowly transform someone's world. One afternoon, the boy noticed that the guard seemed unusually quiet, his posture slightly hunched, his hands resting on his knees as he watched the playground. Concern flickered in the boy's chest. He walked over and asked softly, "Are you okay?" The guard looked at him, a shadow of sadness crossing his face. He sighed quietly, not needing to explain much. The boy understood that there were struggles no one could see, that sometimes the burdens carried were heavy and invisible. He decided then that kindness wasn't just about flowers or drawings. It was also about being present, offering attention and care, simply noticing when someone was struggling. The boy sat beside the guard, letting silence speak for them. He didn't need to say anything. His presence alone was enough. Slowly, the guard's shoulders relaxed and he offered a small smile. It wasn't a big change, but it was real. And for the boy, it was a reminder that even small efforts, sitting quietly with someone, listening, noticing, could be just as powerful as any gesture. A few days later, the school principal noticed the change as well. The guard, who had once been quiet and reserved, now smiled more often, engaged with students in brief conversations, and carried out his duties with a gentle patience that did not go unnoticed. The principal spoke privately to the boy's teacher, mentioning how remarkable it was to see the guard opening up, and how small acts of kindness had clearly made a difference. The boy felt a quiet pride, not because of recognition, but because he understood the power of empathy and thoughtfulness. One particular afternoon, the boy decided to do something more. He gathered a small group of friends and shared his idea. They could all contribute small gestures for the guard, not because they wanted thanks, but because they wanted to show appreciation for someone who worked quietly and tirelessly Together they made tiny cards, picked flowers, and wrote notes, each child contributing something small but meaningful. When they approached the guard with their gifts, the man's eyes widened slightly in surprise, and then softened as he received each one. For a long moment, the guard simply held the cards and flowers, taking them in with care. His voice, when he finally spoke, was quiet but filled with emotion. "I never expected this. I've spent so many days unnoticed, and now, this, it means more than words can say." The boy felt tears welling up, but he blinked them away. He realized that sometimes, the simplest acts, giving a flower, offering a smile, being present, could touch someone's heart deeply, creating memories that would last far beyond a single day. As the days went on, the relationship between the boy and the guard grew stronger. They didn't need constant words or explanations. Their connection was built on small acts, on empathy, and on noticing each other in ways that mattered. The guard began to share small stories with the boy during breaks, simple tales of his past, memories of people he had known, and quiet reflections on life. The boy listened intently, understanding that sometimes giving someone attention and care was the greatest gift of all. The boy began to see the guard in a new light, not just as the man at the gate, but as a human being with his own joys, struggles, and quiet resilience. And the guard in turn started to see the boy not just as a student, but as someone who cared, who noticed, and who understood the value of kindness. It was a mutual understanding, quiet but profound, built over small moments of shared attention and thoughtfulness. One afternoon, the boy brought another small flower, this time bright and golden, a color that seemed to capture the warmth of the sun. He handed it to the guard, who accepted it with a soft chuckle and a smile that reached his eyes. "You have a way of finding the right little things," he said. The boy simply nodded, realizing that the right things were often the simplest ones, the gestures that didn't cost much but carried deep meaning. The ripple effect of kindness continued to grow. Other students became more attentive, noticing the guard and offering small tokens of appreciation. Teachers began to acknowledge his hard work as well, and the guard slowly became an integral part of the school community, not just in duty, but in presence and personality. And through it all, the boy remained quietly observant, understanding that even one small act, repeated over time, could spark something remarkable in someone's life. That evening, walking home with the memory of the day fresh in his mind, the boy thought about the power of empathy, the quiet strength of noticing someone, and the ripple effect of kindness. He understood that even small gestures, flowers, notes, a smile, or just being present, could touch hearts in ways that words often could not. And he knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. The quiet acts of care, the moments of attention, had already begun to shape something larger, something meaningful, and he felt a quiet joy in knowing that he had played a small part in it. The boy didn't yet know the full story behind the guard, nor the challenges he faced beyond the school gates, but he knew that his gestures, his care, and his attention had mattered, and he realized that sometimes being there for someone, noticing them, and offering small kindnesses was enough to create change, hope, and connection, one small moment at a time. The days passed quietly, each morning blending into the next, but the boy noticed a change in the air around the school. The guard, once a quiet and almost invisible presence, had begun to open up in small ways. His smiles were more frequent, his steps lighter, and even the way he interacted with students carried a new warmth. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but the boy, who had been paying close attention, could see it clearly. The small gestures, the flowers, the drawings, and even the silent moments together had begun to have a deeper impact than anyone could have expected. One afternoon, during the last break of the day, the boy approached the guard, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers he had gathered along the edge of the playground. The flowers were simple and uneven, some leaning awkwardly, but they were bright and full of life. He offered them quietly, and the guard accepted with his usual gentle smile. But today there was something different in the man's eyes, a flicker of hesitation, a softness that carried a deeper weight. "You always bring little reminders of life," the guard said softly, almost to himself. "But sometimes I wonder why someone like you notices someone like me." The boy tilted his head, unsure what to say. He had noticed the change in the guard, but he didn't fully understand the man's words. I wanted you to know you matter," he replied simply. The guard looked down at the flowers, then back at the boy, his voice catching slightly. "You don't know what this means," he said quietly. "Most days I feel invisible. Most days I carry so much that no one sees. And now someone finally notices. Someone finally cares." The boy felt a lump in his throat. He had known the guard worked hard, that he carried responsibilities quietly, but he didn't know the depth of the loneliness, the weight of life outside the school. The man's words were soft but heavy, filled with an unspoken story of struggle and endurance. Curiosity stirred in the boy, but he didn't press. He simply sat beside the guard, letting silence fill the space. The man's gaze wandered over the playground, over the trees swaying in the wind, over the empty benches where students had once played. Then finally he spoke again, a little more firmly. "I lost someone very dear a long time ago. Someone who meant everything to me. And after that, everything became quieter, lonelier. I went through my days just going through the motions, unseen, unnoticed, but doing my best because that's all I could do." The boy listened intently, the weight of the words sinking deep. He realized that the guard's quiet demeanor, his soft smiles, and even his patience with students were not just part of a routine. They were a shield, a careful way to keep going despite pain and loss. The boy's heart ached with a mixture of empathy and admiration. "I didn't think anyone would notice," the guard continued, his voice breaking slightly. "I didn't think anyone would care. And now, you noticed. You really noticed. It's more than I can explain." He paused, looking at the boy with eyes that were wet, not with anger or frustration, but with relief. Relief that someone finally saw him. Not just the job he did, not just the uniform he wore, but him, the person underneath it all. The boy reached out, placing a hand gently on the guard's arm. "I see you," he said softly. "I see all the little things you do. And I think you're important. You really are." The guard's shoulders sagged slightly, as if a long-held burden had lifted just a little. He smiled, a quiet, tender smile, and nodded. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't think I've ever had anyone say that to me before." For a long while they sat together, the boy noticing how even small gestures could carry such weight. The flowers, the drawings, the simple presents, they were more than just tokens. They were acknowledgments of a life often overlooked. Affirmations that mattered in ways that words alone could never fully express. Over the next few days, the boy observed a deeper shift in the school environment. Other students had begun to notice the guard more consciously. Some greeted him with cheerful hellos, others offered small notes or drawings. Teachers began to acknowledge him as well, thanking him for his efforts, chatting briefly, and showing a small but meaningful recognition of his presence. The guard, who had once remained distant and quiet, started engaging more openly. His smiles were warmer, his voice more relaxed, and the soft lines of sadness on his face seemed less pronounced. It was during this time that the boy realized the true power of noticing. It wasn't about grand gestures or recognition for oneself. It was about empathy, connection, and the ability to see someone for who they truly were. The guard, once invisible, was becoming visible again. Not just as a worker at the school gate, but as a person with feelings, experiences, and a story worth hearing. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched across the playground, the boy approached the guard with a small card he had made. On the card were simple words. "Thank you for all you do. You matter." It was nothing elaborate, just words written from the heart. The guard took it in his hands and studied it carefully, his eyes glistening. This is special," he said softly. "I can't remember the last time anyone made me feel noticed like this. It's a strange, beautiful feeling. Thank you." He held the card close for a moment, then tucked it safely into his pocket. The boy felt a quiet pride, but more importantly, he felt joy. He understood now that true kindness didn't need recognition. It was its own reward. Later that week, the boy noticed the guard staying longer than usual at the school gate, even after the last student had left. He had a thoughtful expression, almost as if he were reflecting on the small moments of connection that had recently touched him. The boy walked up quietly, not wanting to disturb him. "You're thinking," the boy said softly. The guard smiled faintly. "I am," he admitted. "I've spent so many years doing my job quietly, going through the motions, but now it's different. I've been reminded that small gestures matter, that noticing someone, offering kindness, even in the smallest ways, can change a life." "My life," the boy nodded. "That's why I brought the card," he said simply. "I wanted you to know you're seen. You're important. The guard looked at him, a quiet gratitude shining in his eyes. "You've reminded me of something I had almost forgotten," he said softly. "Even when life feels lonely or heavy, there are people who notice, who care, who make things better in ways that don't cost much. And that is everything." In the days that followed, the guard began to open up more than anyone had ever seen before. He started sharing small stories about his life, simple memories that revealed the person behind the uniform. The students, guided by the boy's example, began to treat him not just with politeness but with genuine respect and kindness. Teachers took the time to acknowledge him, and a quiet community of care grew around him, centered on recognition and empathy. The boy realized that the true impact of his small gestures was much greater than he had imagined. The guard's quiet resilience, once unnoticed and underappreciated, was now recognized and celebrated in subtle but meaningful ways. It was a reminder that every person carries hidden struggles, and that kindness, no matter how small, has the power to transform lives. One evening, as the boy left school, he noticed the guard lingering by the gate, watching the empty playground. The man's posture was relaxed, his expression calm, and there was a light in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The boy approached and handed him a small flower, fresh and bright. The guard accepted it with a gentle nod, and for a moment they stood together quietly, two souls connected by empathy, recognition, and care. "You've changed things," the guard said softly. "Not just for me, but for the whole school. People are noticing, caring, being kind, and it started with you." The boy smiled. "It's not just me," he said. "It's everyone who decides to notice, who decides to care even in small ways. That's what makes the difference." The guard looked at him, eyes glistening with emotion. "I'll never forget this," he said quietly. "You've reminded me that even in the hardest times, small acts of kindness can light up the darkest days." As the boy walked home that evening, he thought about everything he had learned. He realized that true impact comes not from grand gestures but from noticing, caring, and connecting. The guard's story, his quiet struggles and resilience, had touched the boy deeply, and the small gestures of empathy they shared had begun to transform not just one life, but an entire community. And in that realization, the boy understood the profound truth. Sometimes, a single act of kindness offered without expectation can ripple through the world in ways that are invisible yet powerful, changing hearts and lives forever. The days that followed were brighter than the boy had ever seen them at school. The guard, who had once walked through life quietly and almost invisibly, now carried himself with a calm confidence and a gentle warmth that drew people in. His smile had become more frequent, his eyes lighter, and his presence more noticeable in ways that went far beyond the role of a gatekeeper. It was as though the small gestures, the flowers, the drawings, the notes, and the quiet attention the boy had offered had opened a door, allowing something long hidden to shine through. The boy walked to school one morning, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers he had picked along the road. He had chosen them carefully, bright and colorful, each one a tiny message of care. When he arrived at the gate, the guard was already there, greeting students with the same patience and kindness as always. But today his smile lingered a little longer. The boy held out the flowers, and the guard accepted them, taking a deep breath as he inhaled their fragrance. "You've brought the world to me in these flowers," the guard said softly, his voice full of emotion. "You've reminded me that even small gestures can make a difference." The boy felt a warmth in his chest. He had learned over the past weeks that kindness did not need applause or recognition. It was its own reward. Seeing the guard happy, seeing the light return to his eyes was enough. He handed the flowers quietly, and for a moment they simply stood there, two souls connected by understanding, empathy, and care. Over the next few days, the change in the school atmosphere became even more noticeable. Students began greeting the guard with genuine smiles and warm words. They offered small acts of kindness, helping him carry things, drawing pictures, writing notes, and sometimes just saying thank you in a quiet, heartfelt way. Teachers also took notice. They began to acknowledge the guard more openly, speaking to him with warmth and appreciation. What had once been a quiet, almost invisible presence had become an integral part of the school community, recognized and valued by everyone. The boy watched all of this with a sense of quiet pride. He did not seek recognition for himself, but he could see the ripple effect of his small actions. A single flower, a few words, and moments of attention had sparked a transformation. The guard, who had carried loneliness and silent struggle for years, was now seen, appreciated, and even celebrated in subtle, meaningful ways. One afternoon after school, the boy noticed the guard standing alone near the gate, looking out at the empty playground. He approached quietly, carrying a small notebook he had prepared. Inside were drawings, short notes, and little words of encouragement, carefully written and drawn over the past few days. He handed it to the guard with a shy smile. The guard opened the notebook slowly, turning the pages with care. Each drawing, each note, carried the boy's thoughtfulness, and the guard's eyes softened as he read them. He looked up at the boy, his voice breaking slightly. "You've filled these pages with care, with understanding, and with love. I can't remember the last time anyone made me feel this way. Thank you." The boy smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He had learned that gestures, even small ones, could carry incredible weight. They could reach places that words alone might never touch. They could heal wounds that had been carried silently for years. And in offering them, the boy had not only brightened the guard's days, but had also learned the profound value of empathy, attention, and kindness. Over time, the guard began to share more of his life with the boy and the students. He spoke of his past quietly, stories of hard work, of love lost, and of the small joys that had kept him going despite hardship. The students listened intently, realizing that the man who had always seemed quiet and distant had a depth of experience and emotion that few had ever considered. They began to understand that everyone carries unseen stories, and that kindness and attention could bridge gaps that might otherwise remain forever untraveled. The boy noticed that the guard's smile had grown even more genuine. There was a lightness in his steps, a softness in his tone, and an ease in his manner that had not been there before. He laughed more openly now, sometimes joining in the playful banter of students. It was subtle, quiet, and unassuming, but to the boy it was profound. The guard, once burdened by loneliness and silent struggle, had begun to experience joy again, in part because of the small, thoughtful gestures that had started with a single flower. One day, during a school assembly, the principal decided to acknowledge the guard openly. Speaking to the entire school, he highlighted the guard's dedication, his quiet kindness, and the ways he had always looked out for students without ever expecting anything in return. The students applauded, some even cheering, and the guard's eyes glistened with tears. He nodded, a small smile spreading across his face, and for the first time the boy saw him fully recognized, fully appreciated by a community that had once overlooked him. After the assembly, the boy walked up to the guard, holding another small flower he had picked that morning. The guard accepted it, holding it gently as he spoke. "You've started something here," he said softly. "Not just for me, but for everyone. People are noticing, caring, and being kind because someone reminded them how important it is, and that is everything." The boy felt a quiet happiness he could not fully describe. He had learned that change did not always come in grand gestures or dramatic moments. Often it came quietly, through observation, empathy, and small acts of care that over time created ripples strong enough to reach far beyond the initial act. The guard's life, once quiet and lonely, had begun to shine in a new light, not because of fame or reward, but because someone had chosen to notice, to care, and to act. As the weeks passed, the guard became a cherished part of the school community. Students greeted him warmly, teachers spoke to him with respect and kindness, and the boy continued his small gestures of attention, flowers, and notes. The guard had become more than a presence at the gate. He had become a symbol of resilience, quiet dedication, and the power of human connection. One afternoon, the boy approached the guard with a simple card. On it, he had written just a few words. "Your kindness changes everything. Thank you for being you." The guard accepted the card with a soft smile, holding it close to his heart. "I will never forget this," he said quietly. "You've reminded me that life can be bright even when it feels dark. You've reminded me that being seen matters, and that kindness matters more than we sometimes realize." The boy nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He realized that this was the true meaning of his small gestures. It was not about reward, recognition, or attention. It was about connection, understanding, and the ability to make a difference in someone's life, however quietly or subtly it might be. In the following days, the boy noticed that the guard's demeanor had shifted completely. There was a calm confidence in his posture, a gentle warmth in his interactions, and a quiet joy that radiated in small ways. He laughed more often, engaged with students, and even began to share stories and advice, becoming a quiet mentor to many who had once only seen him as the man at the gate. The boy watched all of this, understanding that the smallest gestures can create the greatest change, especially when done with sincerity and empathy. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow across the playground, the boy walked to the guard with a small flower. He handed it over without words, knowing that the gesture alone carried meaning. The guard accepted it, holding it gently, and smiled in a way that was full of gratitude and quiet joy. For a moment, they simply stood together, two souls connected by understanding, empathy, and a shared sense of humanity. "You've changed so much for me," the guard said softly, "not because of the flowers or the drawings or the words, but because you cared. You noticed, and that makes all the difference." The boy smiled. "It's not just me," he said. "It's everyone who decides to notice, to care, to act kindly. That's how the world changes." The guard nodded, his eyes reflecting the golden light of the sunset. "Then we've both learned something," he said quietly. "Kindness is not just an action. It's seeing, understanding, and giving without expecting anything back. And when someone does that, it changes lives, sometimes in ways we can't even imagine." As the boy walked home that evening, he felt a quiet satisfaction, a deep understanding of the power of empathy and small gestures. He realized that life is full of unnoticed people, of silent struggles, and of moments that can pass by without recognition. But it only takes one person, one small act, to make a difference. The boy understood now that kindness is not measured by size or grandeur, but by sincerity, attention, and the willingness to see another human being for who they truly are. And so, the story that began with a simple flower had grown into something far greater. It had transformed a life, created a ripple of kindness, and reminded everyone that even the smallest gestures, done with care and sincerity, can leave a lasting impact. The guard, once quiet and almost invisible, had become seen, appreciated, and valued, and the boy, through his thoughtful actions, had learned the true meaning of empathy, connection, and the power of noticing those who are often overlooked. In the end, it was not about recognition or reward. It was about human connection, about the quiet joy of touching a life in a meaningful way, and about the simple, profound truth that every act of kindness matters. The boy and the guard had shared something rare and beautiful, a connection born from attention, care, and the understanding that even the smallest gestures can light up hearts, change lives, and leave a lasting mark that neither time nor circumstance could ever erase. Weeks turned into months, and the school settled into a rhythm of its own. But the changes sparked by the boy's simple acts of kindness continued to shine brightly. The guard, once quiet and reserved, had become a familiar and cherished presence in the lives of the students. He was no longer just the man at the gate. He was someone they looked up to, someone they trusted, and someone whose quiet wisdom and gentle humor made the school a warmer, kinder place.